we're gonna see that the best way to get to human happiness is to be average. Hi, my name is Wani. I am a philosophy student at La Sorbonne, and today I'll be talking about how it is that we miss human happiness in relation to Aristotle. So this video will be broken down into three main parts. The first part is we're gonna identify human happiness, and then we're gonna identify how it is that we can actually identify the best way of getting there, which is with excellent character. And then the third part is basically how it is that the reason why we miss the mark is because we don't have that element that comes with excellent character that would actually show us how it is that we get to human happiness. And this element is called mesotes or mediatité, or the just middle. And we're gonna see that the best way to get to human happiness is to be average. Yeah. Like, just wait till the end. It makes sense, but it doesn't sound very, exciting and motivational. But that's what it is, and that's what we're gonna go through today. And then reach through the end and enjoy some Aristotle spice. My question is, why do we call it human happiness and not just plain happiness? For this, it's because in Etika Nikomak, what Aristotle's working on is not the science of nature, but the science of the human activity. The human activity is open to contingency. And what we're trying to delineate the difference with in terms of the capacity of failing and not being perfect is that that's on the side of the human and not happiness. The other part is that with happiness, it is not achievable by any living being. Something that is particular to Aristotle, or at least something that I really realized with reading him in these terms and also for my class on social sciences, is that he's very based on this idea that the being is the natural being. Man is a political animal, so it's part of nature. And yet he always also tries to find what it is that distinguishes man. He's, if you know Aristotle, it's about like hierarchies. What is it that actually distinguishes man from every other living being is that we possess logos. Logos is logic, logos is reason, logos is parole, like our capacity for language and speech. And also, just for one more added layer to that, is that it's not just any human being. At his time, the only person that can qualify or try to realize his potential as a political animal is an adult male. Women, children, and slaves, you're not even in the running to try to achieve human happiness. Give up, move on. Of course, I say this as a joke, but I think it's also very important not to modernize to say that this is a universal concept when clearly it wasn't within his logic to account for other beings besides adult males. So you know what they say, we can agree that we all want to be happy, but then we can't agree on what it is that happiness would mean to each person. Like, is it money? Is it love? Is it friendship? Is it a good career? Is it ambition? And the other thing that we can't agree on is how it is that we get there. But we can forget that because Aristotle gives us clear definitions and conditions and how it is that we continually strive for it. One strives towards happiness, and it is not a state, it is an activity. Happiness is an activity of the soul according to virtue, excellence. If there are many, the best. Here, happiness is active and real, that has an effect on real life, that has a reality, effective reality in real life. And it can't be a possibility, it has to be done. The first thing that we want to dissect is what is activity. There is a hierarchy of activity that subordinates all other ends to reach the supreme end, which is happiness. So you imagine a pyramid, and then on the top is happiness, the supreme end. And the supreme end has the characteristics called kat ato. Kat ato means end in and of itself. And all the things that at the bottom that would actually try to help you lead up to this thing called happiness is other ends. And these ends are ophélimon. Ophélimon is basically as utile, or a tool to get to the end. So you're making these ends as a means to get to the ultimate end. And it's the idea that happiness is the supreme end because all ends actually behind it leads to us wanting this end. I want to earn money so that I can actually be happy. I'm not earning money for money's sake. And if you're earning money for money's sake, then you're not actually seeking happiness. I'm just going to close this parenthesis. If you are happy, you are virtuous. It is non-negotiable. You can't be happy and non-virtuous. So the second part that we want to look at is the soul. So this isn't simply a physical activity, but that of intellect. It comes also with reason. And happiness is, I think it was called like a double excellence of physical excellence and the soul. Analogies that he made with like eyesight, you need to have the capacity to see well. So like, and to see well is an excellence, to see itself is not an excellence. So the third part is excellence. So in modern terms, virtue is what is worthy of praise. And just for a quick delineation between excellence and effect, an effect of an action is that I made a video on philosophy on YouTube. Excellence would be that this is a video of quality as it's made by a student who has a very precise professor who teaches at the best university of France for philosophy. Hi, a quick intermission from Le Jardin de Luxembourg just for 2 announcements. One, that this video is brought to you by those who support me on Patreon. The crazy thing is that yesterday I actually met Rachel. Rachel has been supporting me on my Patreon for the past 8 months. She's the second person who's ever decided to pledge. So it was a radically insane moment to realize that I was sitting next to her at La Sorbonne, listening to my favorite professor talk about Hegel's logic on how it is that we can deduce life and the incarnated body. So part of this first announcement, besides the crazy moment that happened, thank you Rachel for coming and visiting me, is that if you are able to support my work, or you've ever considered any of my work helpful to you, I would love it if you would consider pledging on one of my 4 different tiers on Patreon. The first is Le Petit Cœur, and it's where you get a credit on all my videos and also access to book club. The second is ... for those who've been sending me your PDFs for feedback. The third is Axioms, which is something that currently me, Jesse and Quentin are really enjoying because we run the gamut between talking about quantum mechanics, and it is a 2-hour call, a 2-hour group video call once a month that, we just talk about whatever it is that interests the group at the time. And the last is Oui Oui. So this is for those who would like to have a one-on-one call to talk about any topic of your interest. It could be tips on moving to Paris. It could be about a philosopher you're interested in knowing more about. So I thank you for your consideration. And now the second announcement is basically I would like to restart book club. So if you're following me on the book club on Zizek's Sublime Object of Ideology, it's time to bring him back. I would like to have a call though, like 30 minutes. I'll leave my email down in the description box below if you want to RSVP. It should be next weekend at some point, but basically I would just like to talk about pacing that will work for everyone, and also like what time or what day would be great for everyone, because I just want to make sure that for those who are interested, it is something that's convenient and doable. So please RSVP so that we can work this out together, design book club together, and have fun together. I thank you for your attention, and now back to the video. Just in this sense, we're thinking of excellence in terms of quality. But then you're going to see in the second part where I actually talk about other forms of virtue and excellence, but that's also why like Aristotle is both interesting but a nightmare to study. The fourth thing I want to talk about is the word many. So as the ethic focuses on the science of human action, that which is particular, our choices are based on particular circumstances. So here is where you might think that there are many ways to reach happiness. Yes, but based on your circumstance, there's only one best way. So me and Sarah and David and whoever person next to me, we have different ways of achieving happiness, but in our own paths, in our own particular situation, there's only one way. And the rest is just like on the side, and they're just like, for us to choose. And that is why you need excellent character, so that you're able to discern between all of them to make the right choice to actually get closer and closer towards human happiness. When we make a choice, it is something that requires both desire and logic. And a virtuous person at the end is a person whose logic is in alignment with their desire, and they desire what is logically good for them. Here's something else that I added to give a clear definition of what happiness is based on function. So happiness is what prevents the regression into infinity. It gives desire meaning. So to desire happiness is to desire something that is by its nature one, τελειών, which is perfect and complete, autarkes, which is something that is autosufficient. So to desire happiness is to desire what lacks of nothing and what needs of nothing. So here is where you get to the state of the virtuous man, not the state of happiness. This state is the state of fulfillment that represents happiness and not happiness itself, in realizing one's nature as a political animal, fulfilling one's function in the city, which is to live a life accompanied by reason. So before we move on, the two things of happiness. One, it is an activity of the soul that seeks to always be in alignment with excellence, the best, the quality. The second is that it gives our desire meaning. It gives us a point to work towards, and this point in of itself is complete, it is perfect, and it is autosufficient. That is what happiness is, and now we're going to talk about how it is that we can actually try to find out how is it that we might actually be able to identify what is the best. And even before that, we're going to see how it is that we need to have excellent character so that we can actually find out how it is that you find the best average. So I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like there's a contradiction, right? How is it that, we've already charted out this thing where all these little like ends are means so that we can reach the ultimate end, which is, the best at the top here as happiness. And yet the thing that we need to get there is actually the best way, and the best way is actually the average. So let's kind of break this down to the first part, which is why is it that it depends on excellent character? And maybe if you had excellent character, you'd know why the average is actually the best way to happiness. To stay on the right excellent path towards happiness, you need to be able to identify excellence. And then you need to identify the best way to attain it or realize it. So when we talk about excellence, there are two forms. There is the intellectual excellence and moral excellence. Intellectual excellence comes from the rational part of the soul. It's techne, which is art, phronesis, which is prudence or sagacité, episteme, which is science, nous, which is intelligence, and sophia, which is sagesse. And on the other side, we have moral excellence, which is the desirable part of the soul. Desirable as in the part that listens and can obey reason, and not the vegetative, nutritive side. There's a huge list, and we'll look at more of them later. But this includes sophrosune, which is moderation, courage, courage, and generosity, and many, many, many more. So when we talk about excellent characters, we're talking about moral excellence. And the reason for that is because we're talking about practice, praxis, like practical life, how it is that you conduct yourself in real life and how it is that you make choices in real life. And this is not about, the theoretical, which is like solving a mathematical equation, which would be on the intellectual excellence. So what makes an excellent character, and what role does it have in helping us arrive at human happiness? Two parts, excellent and character. This isn't like the only way to do it, but this to me makes the most sense. So excellent, again, we said that excellent could be moral excellence, but here we want to talk about ethical or moral excellence, not as in like the example of sophrosune, courage, or generosity, but in terms of disposition to act. So the definition in the Tricot version, which is the translation by Tricot and not Baudeus, second book, 6th chapter, it is, and this is my translation, the disposition to act in a deliberate way that constitutes a just middle relative to us, in which is determined by the straight rule that which determines a prudent man. The straight rule is simply reason. Prudent man is a person who deliberates. And a prudent man is not a virtuous man. There's a lot of conditions that go into what it is that would qualify a virtuous person. If you're a virtuous person, you see the right thing, you do the right thing, you desire the right thing, and there is absolutely no conflict in your soul. What you understand logically and what you feel and what you do and what you desire, all of that is in harmony. And not only that, you know that you're a virtuous person if all of this happens, you do the action, and at the end you feel pleasure for it. And pleasure is the indication that you have achieved perfectly the perfect virtuous action. Do you know that you're not actually like the opposite of this, which is akalastos, like a person who is vicious? Eh, according to Aristotle, you would just know if you were a virtuous person, and everything is measured by this virtuous person. And this is how you get in the end also like to the average, because there are a lot of conditions where it basically says like, oh, because we're human and it's relative to us, but it's not really relative to us. It's more of like what is relative to us in relation to what a virtuous man will do. I gave up at the end, but there were a lot of questions from my professor being like, you know, is this consensus? Like, who decides? And then it was just like, you know, what Aristotle technically wanted to do was give like this objective table of like all the type of human actions, how to explain all of them, and then like, you know, we all just like fall into different categories for everything. An example, something is not voluntary if it is something that is more than the human spirit can handle. So what is something more than the human spirit can handle? Obviously you could say like, you know, immense amounts of torture. Those are very clear cases. But then when you get into different types of people and different circumstances of people, what is considered beyond the human's capacity to withstand, it depends on each person what they will say, what it is. So yeah, that is just something that I want to say about the virtuous man. Moving on to character, ethos, and it's the quality of the irrational part of the soul that is capable of following reason, that we can judge, so we can evaluate a person based on their character. Imagine like a fertile field, and then you just have like different virtues like available to you in potential, as in like in my character I have the potential to be a courageous person, but then you act it, so then you make it active, which is again like one of the conditions of happiness. It needs to be an active use of your reason and an active realization of this virtue of courage. So what is excellent character? The disposition, tendency to act in a deliberate way. So disposition or tendency to act in a deliberate way. Again, the more and more like you use or realize this action or virtue of courage, the more chances you're in a disposition to act courageously. This deliberate way is based on the just middle relative to us. We're gonna talk a bit about that in the third chapter, because I'm gonna read through this passage and he actually describes how it is that we actually find that. So before, when I said there was a bit of a contradiction, usually what happens to Aristotle is that there isn't one if you know how to separate things. When we say like what is the best or the excellence, just spatially don't imagine it like up this top of the pyramid, but imagine like all the choices that are within the pyramid. And basically like the best is our capacity to make the choices within all these different ways so that we can get to the best or work towards the best. And this just middle is determined in relation to the subject of the action and of passion, the person who's desiring and the person who's acting. And it represents the best way, or the best way of conducting oneself, the best way to act in a given situation. And this action is the final process of the deliberation process called choice or decision, or porairesis. In Ethic Nicomac, choice is defined as the deliberative desire of which depends on us, or the second, which is Ethic Adem. Choice is the capacity of each reasonable being to fix a goal in their life. So, you know, one of the ones in the middle, the one that you use to get to happiness. And only by this goal can meaning and sense be given to a particular action. I'm just trying not to modernize it that much, but meaning and sense probably in terms of like direction, but also probably in terms of how it is that we can evaluate it. Because if something doesn't have sense, we can't evaluate it. And if we can't evaluate it, then we can't say that it's like a good or a bad action, or we can't say that it is a vicious or a virtuous action. So part 2, resume, essentially to be able to get to human happiness, you need to be able to identify excellence. To be able to identify excellence, you need excellent character, because excellent character is the disposition of you to be able to act yourself in a deliberate way in accordance to what is relative to us, to find the best average, which is the best way to make the best choice to get to this happiness. So now that that is clear, right? I mean, if it's not, just repeat. Sometimes you just gotta You just gotta look at the definitions over and over again and then just make sure that you keep them all in their like really cute segments, and then it will come together. But let's move on to the third part, which is basically a bit more in depth of what it means, this average, and also his very fun roasting of every person's character that misses the mark. Part 3, the fun part. What I'm going to share with you, which is my translation of a passage from Éthique à Adem, Book 2, Chapter 3. And it would just go through more into detail how it is that the average is actually the best way for us, and then also Aristotle's roasting of how it is that we continually miss the mark. I will begin. On the other hand, in all fields, what is average is best for us. It is what science and reason order, and it is also what produces the best state everywhere. This is clear by induction and deduction. In fact, opposites destroy each other, and extremes are both contrary to each other and to the intermediary term. Since this intermediary term is each time extreme for each of the two extremes, thus the equal is greater than the lesser, and lesser than the greater. Consequently, ethical excellence is necessarily linked to certain averages, i.e., it is a certain médiateté. It is therefore necessary to grasp what kind of médiateté excellence is and to which averages it is linked. So I'm just gonna say this one thing about averages, right? Obviously the first thing you think about is school, but then again, like, you know, you want a high average. You have 5 classes, you take all your grades, you divide it by 5, and that's your average. When we say average here, we basically just want to avoid going into excess on either side. We don't want to have too little of something or too much of something, so that is much more about how it is that we maintain in its average. There's something that I think about a lot as well, like, you know, that my professor said from the very beginning, like, you can't say technically like you're really smart if you don't actually compete in the competition. And you could say like, oh, the way that the competition is judged, or the day that I was like, you know, I did my exam for the competition, it wasn't the best day for me. But it's kind of like too bad. It's not the perfect timing, the perfect element, the perfect however you are, the perfect questions that came out. All of that is taken into account to the actual circumstances. You are your average based on how it is that in the end you show up that one time that you do show up. We are aware of our highest and our lowest state, and what we present or how we are perceived by other people is probably the average, our average state. So here he shares a little table. The one that was my favorite, I remember, yeah, Anonymous. He basically goes through all of it, but you get to see like the difference between excess, deficiency, and the middle. So these are the kinds of affectations to which the soul is susceptible, and some signify an excess and others a defect. A bad-tempered person is one who gets angry more than he should, more quickly, and against more than he should. The indifferent person is the one who becomes irritated with too few people, too infrequently and insufficiently. The reckless person fears neither what is necessary, nor when it is necessary, nor how it is necessary, while the coward fears what he should not fear, when and how he should not. Similarly, the intemperate is the man of desire who indulges in all excesses, while the insensitive lacks the desire even for what would be better and in accordance with his nature, and remains impassive as a stone. The greedy man is one who seeks to profit from everything. The loser, the one who seeks no source of profit or very little. The boaster is the one who attributes more merit to himself than he has. The false modest, the one who does not attribute enough. So you kind of see it's just like too much, too little, and then, yeah, the categories of people. The flatterer is the one who praises more than is right. The malicious one, the one who praises too little. To try too hard to please is complacency. To do so little and hardly at all is arrogance. And again, he who endures no pain, not even if it is to his advantage, is a softy. And for him who endures anything in the same way, to tell the truth, we have no word for him. It's by metaphor that we call him hard, miserable, and rough. And again, a prodigal is one who spends excessively on everything, and a miser is one who never spends enough. Likewise, for the fastidious and the extravagant, the former exaggerates propriety, the latter underestimates it. The deceitful takes advantage of everything in every way, the naive does not seek his due. We are said to be envious when we are chagrined by the successes of others, More often than not, the very success of those who deserve it chagrins the envious. The opposite of the envious, on the other hand, has no name. I love this so much. His access is not even to be chagrined by the success of people who do not deserve it. He's not demanding like gluttons are before food, while his opposite is excessively demanding out of envy. Yeah, basically you get to see how it is that it is in this way for us to best conduct ourselves in life is actually to be in the average. I mean, tell me what's your favorite, but for me it's like the part where it's just like, on the other hand, has no name. Like, what does it mean when one has no envy? And how is it that it is associated with being anonymous? So this is the end of this video, and I hope it's been helpful to you. If you're interested in discovering more about what it means to have joy and self-esteem, I refer you to this video of mine on Spinoza, and I hope you have a good day. Bye.